Good day, everyone. My name is Jessa Quisil, and this is my report on CA 200, Section D. So, in Lesson 3, we will talk about study on institutional agencies in the Philippines, the Code of Kalantiaw, the Bilibid Prison, the San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm, the Iwahig Penal Colony, Correctional Institute for Women, New Bilibid Prison, Davao Penal Colony, Sablayan Penal Farm, Leyte Regional Prison, Provincial Jail System, and last, the Public Attorney's Office. So first, let's talk about the study on institutional agencies in the Philippines. So these are the following institutional agencies of Philippines. The DOJ pursues its mandate through its agencies. So these are the following. So first is the Bureau of Corrections. Second, the Bureau of Immigration. Third, the National Bureau of Investigation. Fourth, Parole and Probation Administration. Next is the Presidential Commission on Good Government, Public Attorney's Office, the Office for Alternative Dispute Resolution, the Office of the Government Corporate Counsel, the Office of the Solicitor General, and last, the Land Registration Authority. So first is the Bureau of Corrections. The Bureau of Corrections, or BUCOR, is charged with custody and rehabilitation of national offenders. That is, those sentenced to serve a term of imprisonment of more than 3 years. So, the Bureau of Correction is this facility rehab a offender, or all prisoners will stay in this Bureau of Correction is a jail. So all offenders will be stay in their facility. So it means it helps the offender to pay their sentence. Next is the Bureau of Immigration. So, Bureau of Immigration, in accordance with the Revised Administrative Code of 1987, the Commission on Immigration and Deportation was renamed Bureau of Immigration. So, at its is more properly called today. So this is what we call today the Bureau of Immigration. Under this code of bureau is composed of three structural units, namely, the Office of the Commissioner, second, the Board of Commissioner, and the last is the Board of Special Inquiry. So these groups act as collegial bodies and exercises quasi-judicial powers affecting the entry and stay of foreign nationals in the country. So, the Bureau of Immigration has three units. So, the first is the Office of Commissioner, and the Board of Commissioners, and the Special Inquiry, which affects the staying of the prisoner, which they are confined. So next is the National Bureau of Investigation. The main objective of the National Bureau of Investigation is to establish and maintenance of a modern, effective, and efficient investigative service and research agency for the purpose of implementing fully principal functions provided under Republic Act numbered 157 as amended. So the National Bureau of Investigation is the one who established and to maintain as a modern, effective, and efficient investigative service. This is the most important nowadays. Next is the Parole and Probation Administration. So, the Parole and Probation Administration, or PPA, provides a less costly alternative to imprisonment of offenders who are likely to respond to individualized community-based treatment programs. So, the Parole and Probation Administration, these are the ones who give a parole probation of a prisoner. Next is the Presidential Commission on Good Government. The Presidential Commission on Good Government shall be charged with the task of assisting the President in the recovery of all gotten wealth accumulated by former President Ferdinand E. Marcos. So his immediate family, relatives, subordinates, and close associates, whether located in the Philippines or abroad, including the takeover or sequestration of all business enterprises and entities owned or controlled by them. So during his administration, direct or through Rominis, by taking undue advantage of their public office and are using their powers. So authority, influence, connection, or relationship. So the investigation of such cases of grafts and corruption as the president may assign to the commission from time to time, and the adoption of safeguards to ensure that the above practices shall not be repeated in any manner under the new government. So, in the institution of adequate measures to prevent the occurrence of corruption. So next is the Public Attorney's Office. So the Public Attorney's Office exists to provide the indigent, litigant and oppressed, marginalized, and underprivileged members of the society free access to courts. So judicial and quasi-judicial agencies by rendering legal services, counseling, and assistance in consonance with the constitutional mandate that free access to court shall not be denied to any person by reason of property in order to ensure the rule of law. So, truth and social justice component of the country's sustainable development. So, the Public Attorney's Office, which provide of free services with the prisoner who can't afford kuan who can't afford a higher rates of payment. So these are the ones who provide free services, and it is charged with the government. So the Office of Alternative Dispute Resolution, to promote, develop, and expand the use of alternative dispute resolution, or ADR in the private and public sector, and to assist government to monitor and to study and evaluate the sue of the public and the public sector of ADR. So these are the duties of the Office of Alternative Dispute Resolution, which to promote and also to develop and to expand the use of alternative. So, the government monitors, study, and evaluate the sue by the public and the private sector of ADR, and recommend to Congress needed statutory changes to develop, and also to strengthen and improve the ADR practices in accordance with world standards. So next is the Office of the Government Corporate Council. The Office of the Government Corporate Council was founded on December 1, 1935, is a government council division under the Department of Justice, or the DOJ. To date, it has emerged as the premier law of government-owned and controlled corporations and their subsidiaries, other corporate offspring, and government-acquired asset corporation. So the Office of Government Corporate Counsel was the one who it is the one under the department of the DOJ. So this is a part of the DOJ, which is it is the premier law of the government. Next is the Office of the Solicitor General. So the Office of the Solicitor General, which is an independent and autonomous office attached to the Department of Justice for budgetary purposes, is the legal representative of the government of the Republic of the Philippines. So the Office of Solicitor General, it is the one who independent which attach when it comes to the budget of the purpose of the government. So its agencies and instrumentalities and its official and agents in any legislation, proceeding, investigation, or matter requiring the services of a lawyer before the local court system or international fora. So the next is the Land Registration Authority. So the Registration Authority is mandated to issue decrees of registration and certificates of titles and registered documents, patents, and other land transaction for the benefit of landowners, agrarian reform beneficiaries, and the registering public in general, and trustworthy record of land ownership and recorded interest there is so as to promote social and economic well-being and contribute to national development. So the Land Registration Authority, which include the certificate of the landowner or the transactions between the new owner or the original owner. So this is needed. The concise history of the Bureau of Corrections. So, the Bureau of Corrections or in Filipino, kawanihan ng mga bilangguan or literally Bureau of Prisons, which was the name of the agency from 1905 to 1989. Abbreviated BUCOR, is an agency of the Department of Justice which is charged with the custody and rehabilitation of national offenders, as what I've said a while ago, who have been sentenced to 3 years of imprisonment or more. So the agency has its headquarters in the New Bilibid Prison Reservation in Muntinlupa. Corrections in the Philippines started during pre-colonial times. It was, however, organized on individual community basis. It was only during the Spanish regime when an organized corrective service was made operational. So when the Americans took over in 1900s, the Bureau of Prisons was created under a Reorganization Act of 1905, which Act number 1407 was dated on November 1, 1905. The main penitentiary was the Old Bilibid Prison in Oroqueta Street, Manila, which was established in 1847 pursuant to Section 1708 of the Revised Administration Code. So, it was formally opened by the Royal Decree in 1865. About 4 years later, on or August 21, 1869, the San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm in Zamboanga City was established to confine Muslim rebels and recalcitrant political prisoners opposed to the Spanish rule. So, their facility, which faces Julu Sea, has the Spanish-inspired dormitories and originally set on a 1,414 hectares sprawling estate. So their facility was faces Julu Sea. So as was given the as what of the picture show. So when the Americans took over in 1900s, the Bureau of Prisons was created under the Reorganization Act of 1905 Act number 1407 dated November 1, 1905 is an agency under the Department of Commerce and Police. So it is also paved the way of the re-establishment of San Ramon Prison in 1907, which was destroyed during the Spanish-American War. So it was destroyed. On January 1, 1915, the San Ramon prison was placed under the auspices of the Bureau of Prisons and started receiving prisoners from Mindanao. So prisoners were transported through rail tracks, a mode which the Americans introduced to prison. So prisoners had to contend with dilapidated facilities within the cramped area. Before the reconstruction of San Ramon Prison, the Americans established in 1904 the Iuhit Penal Settlement, now which was now called the Iwahig Prison and Penal Farm. On a vast reservation of 28,072 hectares, it would reach an aggregate total land of 40,000 hectares in the late 1950s. So, it was located on the westernmost part of the archipelago and far from the main town to confine incorrigibles who the government had found little hope of rehabilitation. So the area was expanded to 41,007 hectares by virtue of Executive Order number 67 was issued by the government Newton Gilbert on October 15, 1912. So the other penal colonies were established during the American regime. On November 27, 1929, the Correctional Institution for Women or CIW was created under Act numbered 3579, while Davao Penal Colony in southern Mindanao was opened in 1932 under Act number 3732. The CIW was founded to provide separate facility for women offenders and to cater to their gender difference. To date, it is the lone women's prison in the country. So, the CIW was created just to separate woman woman from the other gender. So it will cause reduce another crime committed inside the facility. So it will make the female offenders to be safe or to avoid harassing another or to be harassed by another offender female such as male, I mean. So next is owing to the increasing number of commutals to the old Bilibid prison in Manila. The new Bilibid prison was established in 1935 in a southern suburb of Muntinlupa, Rizal. So the old prison was transformed into a receiving center and as a storage of facility for farm produce coming from the colonies. So it is presently abandoned and under the jurisdiction of the Public Estates Authority. So it is literally abandoned. So the prisoners have to build their basic housing areas using materials available in the prison reservation. So the prisoners have to provide their own housing areas. After the American regime, two more penal institutions were established. So these were the Sablayan Prison and Penal Farm in Occidental Mindoro under Proclamation Number 72 issued on September 26, 1954, and Leyte Regional Prison under Proclamation Number 1101 issued on January 16, 1973. The Bureau of Prisons was renamed Bureau of Corrections under the new Administrative Code of 1987 was issued on November 23, 1987, and Proclamation Number 495 or 495 of the President. It is one of the attached agencies under the supervision and control of Department of Justice. So the Bureau of Corrections in the Philippines. So their organization, it is headed by Corrections Director General Yusek General Gerald Kitalig Bantag. The Bureau has 2,862 employees, and the 61% of whom are custodial or ununiformed officers. So the others are the 33% are non-uniformed personnel, and the 6% are members of the medical service. So the national headquarters. Their national headquarters are the Office of the Director General, the Office of the Deputy Director General for Administration, the Office of the Deputy Director General for Security and Operation, the Office of the Deputy Director General for Reformation, and the Bucor Directoral Staff. So the mission of Bureau of Corrections is to maximize the assets value of the Bucor to effectively pursue its responsibility in safety, securing, transforming national prisoners through responsive rehabilitation programs managed by the professional corrections officer. So its mandate, the principal task of the Bureau of Correction is the rehabilitation of national prisoners. So overall, the main duty of the Bucor or the Bureau of Corrections is to rehabilitate the prisoners, and which instantly their responsibility, which managed by the professional. So the Bureau carries out the following tasks to carry out its mandate. So these are the following. First is to confine persons convicted by the courts to serve a sentence in national prison. Second, to keep the prisoners from committing crimes while in custody. So it would avoid the prisoner to commit another crime. So third is to provide human treatment by supplying the inmates' basic needs and implementing a variety of rehabilitation programs designed to change their pattern of criminal and antisocial behavior. So fourth is to engage in agro-industrial projects for the purpose of developing prisons, lands, and resources into productive bases or profit centers. So, developing and employing inmate manpower skills and labor. So, it provides prisoner with a source of income and augmenting the Bureau's yearly appropriations. So, literally, the Bureau of Corrections such a big help of the prisoner. So, the history of Spanish colonial era. So the old Bilibid prison, which was located on Oroqueta Street in Manila, was established in 1847 and by a royal decree formally opened on April 10, 1866. On August 21, 1870, the San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm was established in Zamboanga City for Muslim and political prisoners opposed to the rule of Spain. Next is the American colonial era. The Iuhit Penal Settlement, now known as the Iwahig Prison and Penal Farm, was established in 1904 by the Americans in 28,072 hectares of land. So the land areas expanded to 40,000 hectares in the late 1950s and expanded again to 41,007 hectares for virtue of Executive Order number 67 issued by Government Newton Gilbert on October 15, 1912. The Bureau of Prisons was created under the Reorganization Act of 1905 as an agency under the Department of Commerce and Police. So the Reorganization Act also re-established the San Ramon Prison in 1907, which was destroyed during the Spanish-American War in 1898, and the prison was replaced under the Bureau of Prison and Received Prisons in Mindanao. The Correctional Institution for Women was founded on November 27, 1929 of by the virtue of Act Number 3579 as the first and only prison for women in the Philippines. The CIW is the first facility for women in the Philippines. Later, on January 21, 1932, the Bureau opened the Davao Penal Colony in southern Mindanao, which was the new Bilibid prison, was established in 1935 in Muntinlupa due to the increased rate of the prisoners. In contemporary era, Proclamation Number 72 issued on September 26, 1954, established the Sablayan Prison and Penal Farm in Occidental Mindoro, and the Leyte Regional Prison was established on January 16, 1973 under Proclamation Number 1101. So the Administrative Code of 1987 and Proclamation Number 495 issued on November 22, 1889, changed the agency's name to the current Bureau of Correction from Bureau of Prison. The logo of the Bureau represents the government agency's mandate. So, the rehabilitation of inmate. The logo focuses on the man in prison as the main concern of rehabilitation. It presents man behind bars, but who looks outwards with the hope of rejoining the free community. So the 7 rays of the sun represent the 7 operating prison and penal farm who carry out the reformation programs of the Bureau. And the color green symbolizes hope. The color orange is symbolic of happiness, and the bar of justice represent the Philippine justice system. Capital punishment in the Philippines. When the Philippines had the death penalty, which was the male inmates condemned to death were held at New Bilibid Prison and female inmates condemned to death were held at Correctional Institution for Women in Mandaluyong. So the death chamber of the inmates to be electrocuted was in Building 14 within the maximum security compound of New Bilibid. The Bureau of Corrections or the Bucor Museum previously served as the lethal injection chamber. So what is the history of Bureau of Prisons in the Philippines? The Bureau of Prisons was created under the Reorganization Act of 1905 as an agency under the Department of Commerce and Police. The Reorganization Act also re-established the San Ramon Prison in 1907, which was destroyed during the Spanish-American War in 1898, and the prison placed under the Bureau of Prison and Received Prisons in Mindanao. Next, the Code of Kalantiaw. So the Code of Raha Kalantiaw was a supposed legal code in the epic history Maragtas that is said to have been written in 1433 by Datu Kalantiaw. He is a chief on the island of Negros in the Philippines. The code is now believed by many historians to have been a hoax and that had actually been written in 1913 by Jose Y. Marco as a part of his historical fiction Las Antiguas Leyendas de la Isla de Negros, in English, The Ancient Legend of the Island of Negros, which he attributed to a priest named Jose Marco. In 1990, Philippine historian Teodoro Agoncillo described the code as a dispute document Despite doubts on its authenticity, some history texts continue to present as the historical fact. So the history and authenticity dispute. In 1917, the historian Jose Marco wrote the Code of Calantiao in his book Historia Prehispana de Filipinas, or the Prehispanic History of the Philippines, where he moved the location of the code's origin from Negros to the Panay province of Aklan because he suspected that it may be related to the Ati-Atihan festival. So other authors throughout the 20th century gave credence to the story, and the code is first gained scholarly acceptance when Marco donated 5 manuscripts of the fraudulent documents to the American historian James Alexander Robertson. Robertson presented it in San Francisco in 1915 in a paper entitled Social Structure of and Ideas of Law Among Early Philippine People. In a recently discovered pre-Hispanic criminal code of Philippine Island, Robertson was a notable proponent of anti-Spanish, which was the Black Legend, or the propaganda, and had also deliberately distorted translation of Spanish documents of the Philippines in the compilation of the Philippine Island. So in 1493 to 1898, which 1904 to 1907, co-authored with Emma Helen Blair. In 1965, the University of Santo Tomas doctoral candidate William Henry Scott began an examination of pre-Hispanic sources of the study of the Philippine history. Scott eventually demonstrated that the code was forgedly committed by Marco. When Scott presented this conclusion in his doctoral dissertation, defended on June 16, 1968, before a panel of eminent Filipino historians which include Teodoro Agoncillo, Horacio de la Costa, Marcelino Foronda, Mercedes Grau Santa Maria, Nicolas Zafra, and Gregorio Zaide. Not a single question was raised about the chapter which he had called the contribution of Jose y Marco to the Philippine historiography. However, in 1971, a decoration to be known as the Order of Kalantiaw was to be awarded to any citizen of the Philippines for exceptional and meritorious services to the Republic in the administration of justice and in the field of law. Scott later published his findings debunking the code in his book Pre-Hispanic Source Materials of the Study of the Philippine History. So, the Filipino historians later removed the code from future literature regarding Philippine history. When Antonio M. Molina published a Spanish version of the Philippines through the centuries as Historia de Filipinas in Madrid in 1984, he replaced the code with one sentence la thesis doctoral del historiador Scott Barata la existencia misma de dicho código, or the doctoral dissertation of the historian Scott demolishes the very existence of the code. So the authenticity of the code has been questioned previously by other scholars. However, despite this and despite Scott's findings, changes in textbooks and in academic curriculum were not forthcoming unit almost 30 years following the release of Scott's publication in 1969. In the interim, the Code of Kalantiaw continued to be taught as a part of ancient Philippine history. In 2004, the National Historical Institute Resolution Number 12 declaring that Code of Kalantiaw has no valid historical basis called for. First is the Official affirmation that the Kalantiaw Code is a 20th century fraudulent work by Jose Marco. Second, the President of the Philippines ceased to honor retiring Supreme Justices and other international dignitaries with the Order of Kalantiaw. And third, the revoking of Executive Order 234, which recognized Datu Bondahara Kalantiaw as the first Philippine lawgiver and declared a Hall of Fame and library to be constructed in his honor in Batan, Aklan as a national shrine. This NHI, or the National Historical Institute resolution, was approved by the Office of the President in 2005. So the laws of Kalantiaw Code. Article 1. Article 1, which stated, "You shall not kill, neither shall you steal, neither shall you do harm to the aged, lest you incur the danger of death. All those who infringe this order shall be condemned to death by being drowned in the river or in boiling water." So the Article 1 includes you should have you should not have you should not kill or steal, which which who who denied the law. The All those who disobey the law, the death will be drowned in river or through boiling water. So that was the Article 1. In Article 2, you shall obey. Let all your debts with the headman be met punctually. He who does not obey shall receive for the first time 100 lashes. If a debt is large, he shall be condemned to thrust his hand in boiling water thrice. For the second time, he shall be beaten to death. The Article 3, obey you, let no one have women that are very young nor more than he can support, nor be given to excessive lust. He who does not comply with obey and observe this order shall be condemned to swim for 3 hours for the first time, and for the second time to be beaten to death with sharp thorns. So those who disobey this law, the order will be swim for 3 hours. So as you 3 hours for the first time, of the second time, until he was beaten with a sharp. So in Article 4, observe and obey. Let no one disturb the quiet of graves. When passing by the caves and trees where they are, give respect to them. He who does not observe this shall be killed by ants or beaten to death with thorns. In Article 5, you shall obey. He who exchanges for food, let it be always done in accordance with his word. He who does not comply shall be beaten for 1 hour. He who repeats the offense shall be exposed 1 day among the ants. In Article 6, you shall be obliged to revere sites that are held in respect, such as those of trees of recognized worth and other sites. So, those who fails to comply shall pay with 1 month work in gold or in honey. In Article 7, this shall be put to death. He who kills trees of venerable appearance, who shoot arrows at night at old men and women, and he who enters the houses of the headman without permission, he who kills a shark or a street cayman. So, in Article 8, slavery for a dome or a certain period of time shall be suffered by those who steal away the woman of the headman, by him who keep ill-tempered dogs that bite the headman, by him who burns the field of the another. In Article 9, all they shall be beaten for 2 days. Who sing while traveling by night, kill the manaul, tear the documents belonging to the headman, and malicious liars, are who mock the dead. In Article 10, it is decreed an obligation that every mother teach secretly to her daughters matter pertaining to lust and prepare them for womanhood. Let not men be cruel, nor punish their women when they catch in the act of adultery. Whoever shall disobey shall be killed by being cut to pieces and thrown to the caimans. In Article 11, this shall be born, who by their strength or cunning have mocked at and escaped punishment, and who have killed young boys or tried to steal away the woman of the elders. The Article 11, this shall be drowned, and all who interfere with their superiors or their owners or masters, all those who abuse themselves through their lust, those who destroy their anitas or idols by breaking them or throwing them down. In Article 13, all this shall be exposed to ants of a half a day, who kill black cats during a new moon or steal anything from the chief of Agarang, however small the objects may be considered. So in Article 14, this shall be made slave for life. So those who have beautiful daughters and deny them to the sons of chiefs, and with bad faith hide them away, so they will become as slaves forever. In Article 15, concerning beliefs and superstitions, this shall be beaten, and those who eat the deceased flesh of beasts which they hold in respect, or the herb which they consider good, or who wound or kill the young of the manaol of the white monkey. In Article 16, the fingers shall be cut off. Those who break idols of wood and clay in their alangans and temples, of those who destroy the daggers of the Tagalons or break the drinking jars of the latter. In Article 17, this shall be killed. Those who profane sites where idols are kept, and sites where are buried with the sacred things of their diwatas and headmen. He who perform his necessities on those places shall be burned. In Article 18, those who does not cause these rules to be obeyed, if they are headmen, they shall be put to death by being stoned and crushed. And if they are agarangs, they shall be placed in rivers to be eaten by the shark and the caiman. The 7 institutional corrections of the Philippines. So first is the New Bilibid Prison. In Muntinlupa, Metro Manila is the main insular penitentiary designed to house the prison population of the Philippines. It is maintained by the Bureau of Corrections or the Bucor under the Department of Justice as of May 2018. The NBP houses 26,877 convicted criminals. In 1940, prisoners were transferred to the NBP from the old Bilibid prison known as the Cárcel y Presidio Correccional, or in Spanish for Correctional Jail and Military Prison, in Manila. So the remnants of the old facility was used by the City of Manila as its detention center known today as the Manila City Jail. So this was called before the New Bilibid Prison. The penitentiary had an initial land of 551 hectares, which 1,360 acres. But 104 hectares or 260 acres were transferred to a housing project of the Department of Justice, which was the additional land of the NBP reservation is used for the Bureau of Corrections headquarters. During the Japanese occupation of the Philippines during World War II, the Bilibid was a prisoner of war and civilian internee camp where American soldiers and civilians were held by the Japanese. So in 1200 internees and POWs were freed by the American Army on February 4, 1945 during the Battle of Manila. So the government of the Philippines planned to create a regional prison in Nueva Ecija through a public-private partnership. And the old Bilibid prison, then known as a Cárcel e Presidio Correctional in Spanish Correctional Jail and Military Prison, occupied a rectangular piece of land that was part of the Mayhalik estate in the heart of Manila. The old prison was established by the Spanish colonial government on June 25, 1865 via royal decree. It is divided into two sections. The carcel could accommodate 600 inmates and the presidio which could hold 527 prisoners. In post-war, from the end of the World War II until 1954, the Japanese criminals were held within the prison under prison superintendent Alfredo Bonnier. On June 5, 2004, Department of Justice under Secretary Francisco Baran III, supervising official on the Bureau of Corrections and the NBP, said that the National Penitentiary will be moved to Barangay San Isidro in Laur, Nueva Ecija. The death penalty of the new Bilibid prison. The execution chamber for inmates sentenced to death by electrocution was in Building 14 within the maximum security compound. As of 2015, it is used to house maximum security prisoners, and the former lethal injection chamber is now used as the Bureau of Correction in Bucor Museum. Blackman wrote that the men's death row in Building 1 was uncharacteristic of the rest of the prison, and the place reeks of gas burns, sewage, sweat, and fear. So their recreational facilities, the prisoner passed the time in the basketball court in the penitentiary gymnasium and also engaged in the production of handicrafts. So various religious denominations are active in prison ministry, with Mass said daily in the prison's Roman Catholic chapel. A locale of the Iglesia ni Cristo is also on the prison grounds. So, the religious groups such as the Philippine Jesuit Prison Service, the Caritas Manila, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and the Amazing Grace Christian Ministries also extend medical service to the prisoners. The research participants agree that the use of inmate leaders is an integral component of prison management and MAC. Inmates can either assume custodial, administrative, and rehabilitation functions. Their educational facilities inside the compound provide elementary education, the high school education, and the vocational training and adult literacy program. It is also provide a bachelor degree in commerce, which was the New Bilibid prison also houses a talipapa, or a small wet and flea maker, or market, where prisoners can buy daily commodities. In Catarungan Village, on September 5, 1991, the President Corazon C. Aquino issued Presidential Proclamation Number 792, which was amended by Presidential Proclamation Number 120 on December 15, 1992, to the effect that 104.22 hectares of land of developed into housing for employees of the Department of Justice and other government agencies. So this housing project is known as the Katarungan or the Justice Village. So their notable inmates. Amado V. Hernandez. It is a national artist of the Philippines for literature who wrote his masterpiece while imprisoned in the facility. Second, actor Robin Padilla. So he is also converted to Islam and wed in an Islamic ceremony his first wife, Lizelle Serranco, while serving a 2-year prison sentence of illegal weapon possession. He was also released in 1998 after having been granted pardon by the President Fidel Ramos. Next is Claire Phillips, an American spy who was awarded the Medal of Freedom in 1951. Next is former Philippine Senator Jovito Salonga, was imprisoned by the Kempitay on April 1942 during the onset of the Japanese occupation in World War II. Next is Claudio Tihanki, Doctor or Junior, the son of former Chief Justice Claudio Tihanki, Sr., who was convicted of murder, homicide, and attempted murder on October 6, 1995, and he was released in 2008. Next is Hubert Webb, the son of former Senator Freddie Webb, was convicted on January 6, 2000 for his alleged role in the June 1991 Visconde Massacre, or the Supreme Court later acquitted Webb on December 14, 2010. Next is Antonio Sanchez, a former mayor of Calauan, Laguna, who was convicted of rape and homicide on March 14, 1995 for his alleged role in June 1993 murders of Alien Sarmenta and Alan Gomez. Next is General Tomoyuki Yamashita was a commander of the Japanese Imperial Army in the Philippines in 1944. He was incarcerated while undergoing trial for war crimes committed during the Japanese occupation and was eventually executed by hanging in Los Baños, Laguna on February 23, 1946. Next is Junal Nuejka, perpetrator of the 2020 Tarlac shooting. He died while imprisoned on November 30, 2021. Luis Tarok, who pleaded guilty to a charge of rebellion in 1954 and was sentenced to 12 years imprisonment, and he was later sentenced to 4 life terms of additional crimes. He was pardoned in 1968 by President Ferdinand Marcos. Second, the San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm. According to historical accounts, the San Ramon Prison was established in southern Zamboanga on August 21, 1870 through a royal decree promulgated in 1969. So it was established during the tenure of the government General Ramon Blanco, whose patron saint the prison was named after. So the facility was originally established for prisoners convicted of political crimes. So this was considered as the oldest penal facility in the country. Prisoners in San Ramon were required to do agricultural work. During the Spanish-American War in 1898, the prisoners in San Ramon were hastily released and the building destroyed. In 1907, the American administration re-established the prison farm. In 1912, General John Pershing, Chief Executive of the Department of Mindanao and Sulu, classified the institution as a prison and penal colony and therein confined people sentenced by the courts under his jurisdiction. In under Pershing's supervision, several buildings with a capacity of 600 prisoners were constructed. After several years, the colony became practically self-supporting with 75,000 coconut trees which were planted at the beginning of Pershing administration, contributing to the colony's self-sufficiency. Aside from coconuts, rice, corn, papaya, and other crops were also cultivated. On November 1, 1905, Reorganization Act 1407 was approved, creating the Bureau of Prisoners under the Department of Commerce and Philippines. In integrating the Old Believing Prison, San Ramon Penal Colony in Wahig Penal, the Philippine Coconut Authority took over management of the coconut farm from the San Ramon. In 1995, Congresswoman Maria Clara Lobregat proposed the transfer of San Ramon Prison to Bongyao Town in the mountainous area of Zamboanga to give way to a special economic zone. Their facilities and recreation. The San Ramon Penal Prison farm prisoners were being asked to work in farms. So they also have their own school. All who can't read and can write can required to attend school. They encouraged to create a lot of handicrafts which are being sold in their handicraft center. The prisoner passed the time in playing basketball, volleyball, billiard, chess for their enjoyment. They are also given a regular task every day like cooking, cleaning, gardening, and etc. The number of inmates in San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm in the Philippines in 2019 by nationality. As of March 2019, approximately 1.9 thousand inmates in the San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm in the Philippines were Filipinos, whereas only 3 inmates were foreigners. So in 2017, there were approximately 885.9 crime incidents per 100,000 individuals across in Zamboanga Peninsula region, where the prison facility is located. As of November 2021, about 626 inmates in San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm in the Philippines work as farmers or gardeners. In addition, 350 work as laborers, construction workers, and carpenters. The Republic Act numbered 1407, an act to be known as the Philippine Overseas Shipping Act of 1955. The Republic of the Philippines, in common with other maritime nations, recognized the international character of shipping and foreign trade and existing international practices in maritime transportation and declares to be part of its national policy to cooperate with other friendly nations in maintenance and improvement of such practices. Third is the Iwahig Penal Colony. This facility was established during the American occupation. It was, however, during the Spanish regime that Puerto Princesa was designated as a place where offenders sentenced to punishment were exiled. The specific area of Puerto Princesa was selected in the site of the correctional facility. The American military carved a prison facility in the rainforest of Puerto Princesa. The institution had for its first superintendent Lieutenant George Wolfe, a member of the U.S. Expeditionary Force, who later became the first prison's director. Governor Luke Wright authorized the establishment of penal colony in the province of Palawan in November 16, 1904. So this penal settlement, which originally comprised an area of 22 acres, originally served as the depository for prisoners who cannot be accommodated at the Bilibid prison in Manila. In 1906, however, the Department of Commerce and Police, which later became the Department of Public Instruction, moved to turn the institution into the center of penal colony, supervised in accordance with trends at the time. Through the department efforts, the Philippine Commission of the United States government passed Act No. 1723 in 1907, classifying the settlement as a penal institution. So, this was Luke Edward Wright. So, he was a United States political figure. He served as Governor General of the Philippines between 1904 and 1906 and also as Secretary of War from 1908 to 1909. So, the Act No. 1723, September 23, 1907, an act to define and fix the status of prisoners confined in the Iwahig Penal Colony and for other purposes. By authority of the United States, be enacted by the Philippine Commission that, in Section 1, subject to regulations prescribed by the Secretary privileges to public instruction, any prisoner confined at the Iwahig Penal Owners Colony may be provisionally granted a suitable plot of land within the reservation for the purpose of cultivating and improving them may be furnished with such tools, implementing agricultural supplies as may be deemed necessary for the proper cultivation of said land. Such prisoners under regulations approved by the Secretary of Public Instruction may also be allowed to have their wives. By order of the superintendent of the colony, the privilege hereby granted certain prisoners of having their families live with their in the Iwahig prison colony. In Section 2, prisoners family transported to the Iwahig penal colony under the preceding section may be subsisted from the general products of the colony under such jails and regulations as may be prescribed by the superintendent with the approval of Secretary of Public Instruction. In Section 3, prisoners confined at the Iwahig Penal Colony may be classes divided into classes and graded according to the conduct, efficiency, and privileges. In Section 4, subject to the approval of the Secretary of Public Instruction, the Superintendent of the Iwahig Penal Colony is hereby authorized to sell the products of the colony, manufactured or otherwise, that to allow prisoners of the higher grades or classes such percentage. So, in Section 5, in addition to the subsistence of the prisoner wives and special children, authorized by Section 2 of this Act, the superintendent of the colony may furnish a special reward to such prisoners confined to the Iwahig Penal Colony. In Section 6, prisoners occupying positions of special trust in the Iwahig Penal Colony may be granted for the superintendent of the colony with the approval of the Secretary of Public Instruction. In Section 7, the superintendent of the Iwahig Penal Colony shall be ex officio justice of the peace and shall within the limits of the colony, who have all powers conferred upon justices. In Section 8, the Secretary of Public Instruction is hereby authorized to promulgate such rules and regulation. In Section 9, on the expiration of the sentence of any prisoner confined at the Iwahig Penal Colony may, subject to the regulation, be allowed to continue to reside upon the reservation and to cultivate land. In Section 10, the public good requiring the speedy enactment of this bill, the passage of the same is hereby expedited in accordance with Section 2, an act of prescribing the order or procedure by the Commission in the enactment of laws. So in Section 11, this act shall take effect on its passage. So, the settlement was at first beset by attempted escape, but under the supervision of Colonel John R. White of the Philippine Constabulary, who would become a superintendent of Iwahig in 1906, and colony became a successful settlement. A merit system was devised for the prisoners and vocational activities were offered. So this includes farming, fishing, forestry, carpentry, and hospital paramedical work. So the prisoners could choose the vocational activities they wanted. So they can choose what they want. In 1955, Administrative Order Number 20 was promulgated by the President and implemented by the Secretary of Justice and the Secretary of Agriculture and Natural Resources. So, in order also contained a list of classification of colonists who wished to apply for a lot of cultivate. So, lots granted did not exceed 6 hectares. In August 16, 1959, a committee was created by President Carlos P. Garcia to study the state of national prisons. Accordingly, prisoners in Iwahig were divided into two groups, the settlers and the colonists. So, the settlers are those engaged in farming for their own benefit. They are the ones who applications for land to cultivate have been approved. Iwahig is subdivided into 4 zones or districts. So, the central Iwahig is a central subcolony with an area of 14,700 hectares. The Santa Lucia with 9,685 hectares. Demontable with 8,000 hectares, and Inawagan with 13,000 hectares. These are the recent developments of presidential proclamation have dramatically reduced the size of prison reservation of Iwahig. So fourth is the Correctional Institution for Women. In a report dated January 22, 1959, submitted to a committee created by Administrative Order Number 287 by the President of the Philippines, it was noted that before a separate building was constructed especially for women prisoners. So this was created only for women. All female convicts were confined in the old beloved prison on Ascaraga, Street, Manila. The male prisoners were confined in dormitories near the women quarters. Because of this condition, vocational activities of the women prisoners were limited to embroidery, which they became ill. The women were confined in a separate building which was served as a hospital with nurses and prison physician. By the President of the Philippines Administration Code number 287, which was creating a committee to investigate the administrative charges against the Director of Prison Alfredo M. Bonye and Assistant Director Heriberto Misa, and to recommend measures to improve prison administration. The committee is granted all the powers of an investigating committee under Section 71 and 580 of the Revised Administration Code, including the power to summon witnesses, administer oaths, and take testimony or evidence relevant to the investigation. It is authorized to call upon the department, the bureau, agency, or instrumentality of the government for such information as it may require in the performance of its work and for the purpose of securing from information. When women prison needed surgery, they were operated on the beloved prison. After the operation, they were transferred to the infirmary for convalescence. So, after a series of negotiations started by Prison Director Ramon Victorio, the Philippine legislator passed Republic Act numbered 3579 in November 1929. It authorized the transfer of all women inmates to a building in Welfareville at Mandaluyong, Rizal, and appropriated 60,000 for the move. On February 14, 1931, the women prisoners were transferred from the old beloved prison to the building especially constructed for them. Its old name was Woman Prison, was changed to a correctional institution for women. This was in keeping with emerging trends in penology, which emphasized correction rather than punishment. Convicts were brought back into the social mainstream, adjusted and rehabilitated with a better outlook in life. So after the war, the CIW resumed its normal operation. So the Bureau of Public Works made major repairs on the main building, and workshop and infirmary were constructed to the inmates' use. So in 2000, a new four-story building was constructed by the Department of Public Works within the grounds of CIW. It is the growing congestion in the facility. So, an act numbered 3579 in November 27, 1929, which was an act authorizing the transfer to Welfareville of all female prisoners confined in Bilibid Prison, appropriating the sum of 60,000 pesos for its purpose and for its purposes. So, the Act 3579 have three sections only. So first, Section 1, the Secretary of Justice is hereby authorized to order the construction on the grounds of Welfareville of such building may be strictly necessary for the confinement thereof for all female prisoners at present confined in Bilibid Prison. So the Section 2, The sum of 60,000 pesos is hereby appropriated out of any funds in insular treasury not otherwise appropriated to carry out the purposes of this act. So in section 3, this act shall take on its approval. So 5. Next is the Davao Penal Colony. The Davao Penal Colony is the first penal settlement founded and organized under Filipino administration. So, the settlement, which originally had an area of approximately 30,000 hectares in the district of Panabo and Tagum, in Davao del Norte, was formally established on January 21, 1932 by virtue of Act 3732. So this act authorized the government general to lease or sell the lands, buildings, and improvements in San Ramon Prison and Wahag Penal Colony. It is also granted authority to the Secretary of Justice to establish a new prison and penal colony in a suitable public land, which was a budget of 500,000, was allocated. Several committees were created to pick a suitable site for the penal settlement. So in Act number 3732 in November 21, 1939, in Section 1, whether in his opinion the public interest will be promoted, thereby the government general may be authorized to the sale or lease under the Public Land Law or Act numbered 3000 or 38 of the lands, building and improvements of the San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm and Iwahig Farm to private individuals, association, or corporations. In accordance with the recommendation of these committees, Governor Dwight Davis signed Proclamation Number 414 on October 7, 1931, which reserved a site for the penal colony in Davao Province in Mindanao. So this site offered ideal conditions for agricultural activities. During World War II, the colony was converted into a concentration camp with more than 1,000 Japanese internees were committed by the Philippine-American Armed Forces. So the Japanese were treated in accordance with the orders of the American commanding officer. By the President of the Philippines Proclamation Number 1404, whereas it is desirable that the services of professional men and women will be rendered with maximum efficiency. Whereas the growing participation and responsibilities of professionals in the life of community demand that a period will be set aside dedicated to the attainment of the higher ethical standards. Now, therefore, Elpidio Quirino, the President of the Philippines, do hereby complain the last week of October 1953 as Professional Week. On December 20, 1941, the Japanese imperial forces attacked Davao and the colony was among the establishment taken over by the invading army. So the entire settlement was thrown into confusion and a great number of prisoners escaped. Normal operations were inevitably disturbed. In November 8, 1942, a representative of the Director of Prison transferred the colony and its properties to the Japanese authorities. In the remaining colony employees, their families and the inmates evacuated to Iwahig, where they organized the Davao Penal Colony at Inagawan Sub-Colony in Palawan. After the liberation of the Philippines, the colony in exile in Palawan returned to its old site in Davao. A great deal of rebuilding and repair had to be done because the war had almost completely destroyed the colony. So, it was completely destroyed. 6 is the Sablayan Prison and Penal Farm. So, let's talk about. So, it is nearer to Manila than other penal colonies. So, this is more nearer. to Manila. The Sablayan Penal Colony is located in Occidental Mindoro and relatively new, established on September 26, 1954, by virtue of Presidential Proclamation Number 72. The penal colony has a total land of approximately 16,190 hectares. So their prison's record shows that the first colonies and employees arrived in Sablayan on January 15, 1955. Since then, several buildings had been constructed, including the colony's dormitories, employees' quarters, guardhouse, schoolhouse, chapel, and the recreation hall and post exchange. So, the Proclamation Number 72, which was establishing safety and exclusion zones for offshore natural gas wells, flow lines, platforms, pipelines, loading buoy, and other related facility for the Malampaya Depth Water Gas to Power Project over certain waters and submerged lands adjacent to Batangas, Mindoro, and Palawan. So this proclamation number established as safety and inclusion zones, especially for the Malampaya Deep Water, which submerged lands adjacent to Batangas. The three sub-colonies were later organized. So first, one is the reservation, which this day remains part of the protective rainforest. Another is in a coastal area. The third was used by the national government as a relocation site for refuge from eruption of Mount Pinatubo eruption in 1991. Sablayan Prison is a facility where prisoners from NBP are brought for decongestion purposes. So it follows the same colony standards as other penal farms. Last is the 7 Leyte Regional Prison. So the Leyte Regional Prison, situated in Abuyog in southern Leyte, was established a year after the declaration of martial law in 1972 by virtue of Presidential Decree Number 28, while its plantilla and institutional plan were almost ideal. Lack of funds made the prison unable to realize its full potential, and its facilities are often below par compared with those of other established penal farm. So, the Leyte was the lack of funds, which was it was the lowest from the previous prisons as I've discussed. So in Malacanang, Manila, Presidential Decree Number 28, it was the act establishing 7 regional prisons and converting existing national penal institution into regular prisons and penal farms, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. So it was establishing 7 regional prisons, 2 penal institution into regular prisons and penal farms, whereas were pending before Congress prior to the promulgation of the Proclamation Number 1081 dated in September 21, 1979, certain priority measures vital to the establishment and maintenance of peace and order throughout the land. The LRP has an inmate capacity of 500. So, it follows the same agricultural format as the main correctional program in addition to some rehabilitation activities. And the prison admits convicted offenders from Region 6 and from the National Penitentiary in Muntinlupa. So, in provincial jail system. So, what is provincial jail system? So it was first established in 1910 under the American regime, supervised and controlled by the provincial government and headed by the provincial jail warden. So their vision is an institution, it is the one who managed by God-centered professionals and trained personnel to serve as the principal catalyst for rehabilitation, or the restoration that leads to reformation of the social, physical, and spiritual aspect of person being detained to develop a law-abiding citizen for eventual reintegration into the mainstream of the society. So their vision is to manage the detained person to develop a law-abiding citizen. So, and their mission, the Office of Provincial Warden shall promote safe and total detainment and rehabilitation restoration of detainees under its custody. So their mission is to promote safety and total detainment of the prisoner, which was include the rehabilitation and the restoration of the detainees. So their goals and objectives are: the Office of the Provincial Warden is committed to carry out effective implementation of all programs, such as projects and activities relating to jail detainment and rehabilitation of prisoners being sentenced or detained or held by trial by the Court of Justice. So, it is also develop and attend to the welfare of detainees in the provincial jail by providing subsistence and other welfare benefits and through provision of jail decognition programs. So, it also provide protection services and prepare the inmates socially, physically, mentally, and spiritually to become productive citizens for their eventual reintegration to the mainstream of the social upon pardon or release so that they are become ready. So, the PAO or Public Attorney's Office. So, it is a attached agency of the Department of Justice which provide indigent litigant free legal assistance. So, these are the ones who provide free legal assistance of those prisoners who can't afford a higher rate of payment, which they can't afford a higher professional lawyer or an attorney. So, the PAO which provide free legal assistance or provide a attorney for the prisoner. So the PAO also be an independent and autonomous office but attached to the Department of Justice in accordance with Section 38, Number 3, the Chapter 7 of Book 4 of this Code of Purposes of Policy and Program Coordination. So, the PAO shall be the principal law office of the government in extending free legal assistance to indigent persons in criminal, civil, labor, and administrative and other quasi-judicial cases. So, it is responsible for the other cases such as civil, labor, administrative, and other quasi-judicial cases. So, its power and functions shall independently discharge its mandate to render, free of charge, legal representation, the full assistance, and counseling to indigent persons in criminal, civil, labor, or in administrative and other quasi-judicial cases. In the exigency of the service, the PAO may be called upon the proper government authorities to render such service to other persons, subject to existing laws, rules, and regulation. So their mission is to exist to provide the indigent litigants, the oppressed, marginalized, and underprivileged members of the society free access to courts. So it is free, fully free. So judicial and quasi-judicial agencies by rendering legal services, counseling and assistance in consonance with the constitutional mandate that free access to court shall not be denied to any person by reason of poverty, which is not have enough money, in order to ensure the rule of law, truth, and social justice as components of the country's sustainable development. So this is their mission. Their vision is also a God-centered and dynamic bureaucracy that is responsive to the ever-growing legal needs of the indigents and oppressed led by highly competent, world-class, development-oriented, honest, dedicated, and nationalistic leaders and lawyers. That's all my report. Thank you.